The Enigmata, the path that prides itself in spitting in the face of all that is certain, with various tactics of falsifying the truth. And recently we have gotten a new and even more powerful representative of this complicated force, that being Evernight. But what if I told you that this path is real? Yes, it is in fact so real that it has taken hold of this community once again, infecting us with misinformation and forcing us to question all that we know. Now, even though I pride myself in backing up my claims with database entries and such, I have once again found myself on trial. Yes guys, it happened again. The last time we did this, I defended myself valiantly from the Enigmata allegations of spreading misinformation and misleading people when I said that Xandar was jealous of Noose. And since then, it has now been confirmed by the self-enshrouded recluse relic set that Xandar's hatred of Noose originates at least partially from the fact that Xandar is a perfectionist control freak with elitism issues. So becoming the subject of his own creation's reign became something his ego simply couldn't handle. So of course he is envious to say the very least. And even though these people were using leaks to disprove me before the set even released, they still ended up being wrong. But unfortunately, we have been struck again by the Enigmata, because recently I made a short that speculated about Stellarons being from the Abundance in origin. And it is the comments that I received that show me that we have a widespread issue on our hands. Because first it was Polka Kakamon being an agent of Noose and following their orders and being evil and being the bad guy in all of this. That also ended up being false. And now for some reason the Honkai Star Rail community is convinced that Stellarons are definitively from the destruction, and this is backed up by text. So the time has come once again that I must defend myself from this baseless Enigmata slander. Because this is the real life Enigmata revealed. Okay, so that much longer than usual intro out of the way, we will be doing this the same way we did this the last time. So allow me to take the stand and present Exhibit A. And let's start from square one, because some of these individuals seem to think that the purpose of a theory is to mislead people. I was merciful the last time, but since the skip button came out, the number of confident wrong people has multiplied exponentially. Simply put, a theory is an idea that has supporting evidence but cannot be proven as fact. Not because it is false or misleading, but because it isn't universally tested. Because nothing really can be. Not even gravity. Because you would naturally assume that gravity is a law, but nope, it is a law and a theory. My point being that theories are not enigmata, they are explanations of things that happen. So Stellarons happen, and the abundance is my theory, aka my explanation. So let's get to the comments, shall we? Because many of these comments say the exact same thing. Stellarons are seeds of the destruction. Now, to be entirely honest, this is kinda crazy because Lygus says this in reference to our Stellaron. But that is because we got gazed at by Nanook and our Stellaron tethered itself to the destruction. But in reality, the cancers of all worlds, aka Stellarons, are called seeds of disaster, not destruction. This is a huge difference here, because anything can be a disaster. The title of the propagation's Aeon War is called the Swarm Disaster. That happened before the destruction path even had an Aeon. But of course I'm not saying this as to connect Stellarons to Tazieronth, no. Because in truth, Stellarons are living beings that have the unique ability to tether themselves to whatever path they come in contact with. They do this to fulfill the wishes of, well, whatever individual that asks something of them. And throughout the story, we have seen Stellarons tethered to the Preservation on Eurilo 6, Harmony on Penacony, and most likely Remembrance on Amphorius. So it is very possible that Stellarons as living things are not initially followers of any path. And just like any path strider, they can choose whatever path they wish to draw power from. And when they activate and channel the power they get from the paths to fulfill a wish, they fulfill the wish in its entirety, but to an extent that it's excessive and bends around back to being bad. One example being Eurilo 6 asking for preservation from the Antimatter Legion's assault, so the Stellaron froze the planet, thus preserving it in ice. That's the eternal freeze. And also a Stellaron fighting against the destruction, something that it probably wouldn't do if it was a seed of destruction. And another example of this being that one story from Lushaka, because this aqua sprite got mad at land dwellers for taking her home through war, so the Stellaron flooded the entire planet, making everywhere her home. And Lushaka is now an ocean planet. And here's where we realize that Lygus has done irreparable damage to this community with his constant yap, because he thinks he knows things, but he doesn't. Just like when he says that he was gazed at by Noose, when in reality Xandar was, and Lygus is just a thought fragment created from his imperfections. But going back to Stellarons, they don't always end up being lethal either, because the Penacony Dreamscape is still running off of partially unsealed Stellaron power.
Dude, Penacony was already a land of dreams long before it was used as a prison. It was a natural occurrence, not someone asking for it from the Stellaron.
After the war ended, people in the shadows with ulterior motives had the idea of using the Stellaron's power to help build the Penacony Dreamscape. Yes, the entire dreamscape is powered by people dreaming in the Stellaron power that isn't even close to being fully unleashed. So Stellarons aren't even always a bad thing. Which leads me to the point that I addressed in the short. Because between every single story we have heard involving a Stellaron, they all did the same thing. They granted a wish, but responded in a way that resulted in harmful excess. And there is only one path that reflects the same pattern to the smallest detail: the abundance. Because Yaosha is an Aeon known for granting wishes. In fact, Yaosha is so notorious for this that it is described officially to answer all prayers. But we also know that Yaosha is the Aeon of excess. When Foxians and Borisans asked for food to survive their planet's famine, Yaosha blessed their lands to be so fertile that it destroyed their ecosystem, forcing both races to abandon the planet known as Verdantia. And when Shinjo natives asked to become immortal, the Ambrosial Arbor came to be, bearing fruit that granted immortality regardless of whether the person's body and mind could sustain it, which resulted in the Mara. So don't get it twisted, the Mara is not a curse from Yaosha, it is the Shinjo people being mad at the fact that they got exactly what they asked for. The Mara is a natural process their bodies undergo when they live too long because they weren't built for that. They even have it down to a science for how old they can be before the Mara ensues. Watch this video if you're curious about how strange Shinjo native biology is. But to get back on topic, what the abundance does is answer a prayer with so much excess that it becomes dangerous, just like a Stellaron. But this isn't all, because Yaosha's aim is the continued proliferation of life, and when we look back on the work of the Stellarons, they also seem to respond to wishes that revolve around the proliferation of life. Let me explain. Eurilo 6, saving lives. From the Antimatter Legion, certain death. Penacony, creating pseudo-immortality. People can live up to an indefinite amount of time even after their physical body has died through memory bubbles because of Penacony. Lushaka, creating a planet-wide ocean is very much something that can benefit life, as a matter of perspective here. I'm sure life forms like sea sirens would love a planet-wide ocean. And speaking of Amphorius, it's unconfirmed to be linked to the Remembrance, but if you think about it, the cycles, the reset, even though they keep dying, they do come back to life, and that would be the continued proliferation of their lives. Quite literally, they just increase the number of lives they live to millions and counting. So by that logic, it is impossible to deny the potential connection the Stellarons have to the abundance. They just can't be this similar and just not be connected.
But Nova, didn't they say that Stellarons were Masuda by Celenova? I could understand that before they literally said Celenova created the Stellarons. Weren't they made from a part of Sheepbait that got converted into a Ravager? Oh, and isn't it Celenova who makes Stellarons? Celenova, are you sure about that? POV, you skipped the story. No, Celenova is the one who made Stellarons. That's an amusing theory and coincidence, but didn't we already know that Celenova, aka a Lord Ravager, aka one of Nanook's emanators, created the Stellarons? Aren't the Stellarons the work of that Lord Ravager trying to kill the Harmony? They literally showed her the creator of the Stellarons.
Well, I can't read.
Oh, really? Because I don't know where you got that information from. It clearly wasn't me, because once again, that is not what the text says. It says that Celenova follows the path of the Stellarons, and due to this, is speculated to know the secrets of the Stellarons and may be the one placing them around the cosmos. That is all that is stated. Where the idea came from that she created them, I have no idea. And this is kind of funny because if these Enigmata comments are right and the database is right, that means that Celenova is creating Stellarons, planting them around the cosmos, then following them just to place them in other places. Why would she do that? She wouldn't accomplish anything. But these comments aside, even if these speculations are true, she can just be collecting them and planting them in different places. Herta is not the only one who knows how to capture and seal a Stellaron. We learned this from Penacony. The family apparently knows how to seal Stellarons too, which is the very same pad that Celenova has history with, because before becoming a Lord Ravager, Celenova was a harmonic string. See where that makes sense? I just put that together just now. That is insane, by the way. As a Harmony Emanator, she has all the abilities the family has access to, but better. Of course she would know how to capture and steal Stellarons. It makes all the sense. Also, bit of a side note here, but remember when I raised the possibility of a double Emanator being a thing? That was a long time ago, and I got called Enigmata for that too. But now we have Celenova, who is my favorite Lord Ravager for obvious reasons, Celenova, who is actually just a double Emanator. She rose from the remains of the Eternal Centurion harmonic string. She is literally two Emanators in one, while looking way too much like Void Archives. Remember that guy? Otto's look-alike weapon that turned Welt Yang's travel buddy? That guy that definitely isn't Luocha? Yeah, he's out there doing who knows what, but did you know that Void Archives is the one that repaired Shush, that bartender robot? And that Void Archives is a former Nameless? Crazy stuff. Luocha, Void Archives, and Celenova are 100% connected, but I can't prove it yet. But that all aside, Celenova did not create the Stellarons so far as we know, and we know full well that the Cancers of all worlds do not have an innate path affiliation, because they can tether themselves to whatever path they feel like, and for some reason do what they do the same way Yaoshi does, making me think that they are living beings that somehow came from Yaoshi. Also because Yaoshi just makes species sometimes. Looking at you, Heliobi. We already know that Aeons can just make people since Children of Anashrava exist, and they can follow whatever path they want because Evernight chose Enigmata. And though there is a ton of uncertainty in this community, I do what I do to get the facts straight. Why? Because this is the real life Enigmata revealed. I just wanted to make this video in response to the concerning amount of people saying the exact same thing that is in no way confirmed at this current moment. If it does get confirmed, then that means that Celenova is somehow creating Stellarons to follow their path, but also is the one placing them, which makes no sense because that means she flies around in circles. And as goofy and silly as that would be, let's be honest, she is the general of Nanook's army and the newest of the Lord Ravagers. She's got more to do than fly around in circles playing with Stellarons that she herself made. So, as a follower of the erudition, you know that I had to bring some certainty to this conundrum. But what do you guys think? Be sure to let me know, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace, y'all.